Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! In fact, I have never worked at any Walgreens. So this was some 10 years ago, and while the conversation is paraphrased, I remember it like it was yesterday. So background. At the time, I was working grave and swing as a casino player's host in Reno, NV. For those who don't know what this job is, we take care of the high rollers, make sure they get comps, dining, and hotel reservations, get invited to tournaments, limbo rides, you name it. I wore a nice black blazer with a name tag, slacks, comfortable but professional shoes, hair and makeup done. The days I worked swing, I was off at 3 a.m., but after waiting for the bus and ride home, I would make it to my place at about 5 a.m. Directly across the street from my home was a Walgreens. I stopped a lot of mornings to grab a protein shake, pick up prescriptions and so on. But on Wednesday mornings, they put out a lot of clearance items. You could snag small appliances dirt cheap. So I was always there on Wednesday stocking up on Christmas and birthday presents and so on. The employees and manager knew me by sight and some by name. I was usually a zombie after work. I think like most people. And this Wednesday was no different. I was looking over the latest selection, trying to decide if I needed a new coffee maker or just wanted one, because it was clearanced for trying to decide if I needed a new coffee maker or just wanted one because it was clearanced for $5. A woman was next to me speaking Tagalog into her phone. I don't speak it, but Reno has a pretty large Filipino community, so I could at least recognize it. Her language is not important to the story, it just struck me how odd the little things we remember are. She finished her conversation and looked at me. Can I get a discount on this? I don't remember what this was, some small appliances. The box is smashed up. No idea, I told her, but I would ask to plug it in to test it before I buy it if the box is damaged. I have no idea if anyone can actually do that, but it seemed reasonable to me. Why would you sell something that doesn't work? She demanded. I had no idea at this point she thought I worked there. I thought she was making conversation. In my defense, I was half asleep and just wanted a good deal on a damn stick blender. Oh, I told her. I absolutely wouldn't sell it, but I am not in the business of selling things anyway. Oh, so you are too good and important to sell things? That is just for the low employees? I finally looked at her. Until then, I was pretty focused on staying awake. I could see she was getting angry. It dawned on me that I still had my name tag on. I slipped it off. They are the kind with magnets, no pins, and stuck it in my pocket. Oh, sorry. I forgot to take this off. I don't actually work. I started to say I don't work here, but she was having none of that. Oh, you think you're too good to help me? Just because I'm Filipina? She may have said Filipino. I confess I don't know which is correct and going only from memory. My money is good, you. She said something in Tagalog that did not sound flattering. You think you can trick me by taking off your name tag? I just sighed. I don't want your money. I don't work here. I'm shopping. Please just leave me alone, okay? She ignored everything I just said except for, oh, you won't be getting my money because you need to give me this free for not helping me. She ignored everything I just said except for, oh, you won't be getting my money because you need to give me this for free for not helping me. Ma'am, I tried to reason with her. I can't give you that. I really don't work here. If you take it without paying, this is stealing. Oh, now you think I'm poor and a thief? What? Where did poor come from? I want to talk to the manager of the whole store. Lady, I turned back to the shelf. I wish you would talk to anyone but me. I didn't swear because I was angry, I just have a potty mouse. She stomped off her heels, making little tick-tick-tick-tick sounds on linoleum. I decided I did need another coffee maker and that stick blender, and I was putting both in my cart and I heard tick-tick-tick-tick. Great, she's back. But she is not alone. Tom, the store manager, was with her. There she is. That woman shrieked. She called me a poor thief and said a swear at me. I want you to fire her and make her poor. Weird obsession with poverty. Tom looked at me confused. What is happening? I grinned and held up my coffee maker. Well, shopping. Tom was even more confused. But why are you insulting her and swearing? She thinks I work here and wants me to let her steal an appliance. Okay, I know, a bit of an exaggeration, but she started it. This was a moment that her medication stopped working. In a very loud mix of English and Tagalog, she shrieked out our entire interaction. Surprisingly, she told it correctly too, except that I didn't put my name tag away to trick her. Tom was done at this point. He just looked at me and said, "You're fired." The woman grinned maliciously at me, grabbed her smashed up box and stormed off with Tom, as I shrugged and made my way over to the allergy medication, or some other area of the store. I don't 100% remember, but I have terrible allergies, so that seems likely. At the register, Tom asked me what really happened. I told him everything, including how I told her I wished she'd talk to anyone but me. Tom laughed and told me I was still fired. Yay! I grinned. Do I get a severance package? Tom laughed harder. To be fair, you did swear at her. Plus, you don't actually work here, so no severance package. That's it. I shopped there for many years before I moved. I never saw her again, so I'm sure she went on content, was getting me fired, and making me poor. Hey everyone, I've got a doozy of a story for you about my encounter with an entitled man from our homeowners association that ended in a way none of us could have anticipated. Grab your popcorn because this tale has twists, turns, and alarm that ignited a neighborhood drama. I moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood about a year ago, the kind of place where everyone knows each other and block parties are the highlights of the summer. It seemed perfect with its manicured lawns, friendly faces, and a sense of community I hadn't felt in years. Then I crossed paths with the king of entitlement, Mr. Derek. Derek was on a board of our HOA and he took his role very seriously. You know the type, mid-50s, always wearing polo shirts with the HOA logo and a permanent frown etched on his face as if he was born disappointed with the world. My first interaction with Derek came about over, of all things, my lawn. It was afternoon. I was out front trying my hand at gardening, a hobby I picked up to blend in with neighborhood's aesthetic. That's when Derek marched over, clipboard in hand. "Excuse me," he began, not a hint of a smile on his face. "I couldn't help but notice you're planting azaleas in your front yard." I looked up a bit confused and nodded. Yeah, I thought they would look nice. Derek shook his head, tapping his clipboard. "According to the HOA guidelines, Section 4, Paragraph 3, only native plants are permitted in front yards. Azaleas are not on the approved list. You'll have to remove them." I was taken aback. I didn't realize. He cut me off. "Ignorance isn't an excuse. You have 48 hours to comply." That was that. He walked off, leaving me dumbfounded and my azaleas condemned. That encounter should have clued me in on what was to come. But I chucked it up to Derek being overly passionate about his HOA duties. I complied, removed the azaleas and replaced them with an approved plant. Problem solved, right? Wrong. Over the next few months, Derek found issues with everything from the color of my mailbox to the length of my grass. Each infraction was met with a stern warning and a threat of fines. It was as if he had a personal vendetta against me. But things came to a head over, I kid you not, a gardening gnome. One day I received a knock on my door and it was Derek, looking more agitated than usual. "That gnome in your front yard," he started. "It's an eyesore and against the HOA's decor guidelines." I tried to keep my cool. "Derek, it's just a gnome. My kids love it." "That may be, but rules are rules. Remove it or face the consequences." This time I stood my ground. "No, Derek, this has gone far enough. The gnome stays." His eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this," he hissed before storming off. Derek's threats weren't empty. The next day I found a notice from the HOA pinned to my door, fining me for the gnome. This was war. A lawn war. Fueled by a mixture of anger and a stubborn streak I never knew I had, I decided to fight back. I started attending every HOA meeting, challenging Derek on his draconian rules and pointing out his selective enforcement. Our neighborhood was divided. Some supported Derek, believing in the sanctity of the HOA's rules. Others, tired of his tyrannical reign, rallied behind me. The tension reached its peak at an HOA meeting that will go down in history. The room was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Derek was there, as pompous as ever, ready to defend his rule. I took the floor, gnome in hand, and laid out my case. I spoke of community, of understanding, and the need for a bit of leniency and humor in our lives, gnomes and all. Derek retorted, spouting rules and regulations, his face filled with fury, and the meeting turned into a shouting match. Neighbors, picking sides, voices raised in the chaos. And then the unexpected happened. In the heat of the debate, Derek made a fatal mistake. He boasted about how he'd been using HOA funds for personal expenses, thinking it would intimidate us into submission. What he did not anticipate was the presence of a new neighbor who was also a local police officer. The room went silent, Derek's face drained of color as he realized what he just admitted to. The officer stepped forward, her voice calm but authoritative. "Mr. Derek, I'm going to need you to come with me." The fallout was immediate. Derek was arrested for embezzlement and the news spread like wildfire through our neighborhood. The tyrant of the HOA was dethroned, all because he couldn't let go of a garden gnome. With Derek gone, the neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief. The HOA was restructured, adopting a more lenient and inclusive set of guidelines. My gnome was given a place of honor in my front yard, a symbol of our victory against tyranny. As for me, I became something of a local hero, though I'm just glad to have my peaceful life back. And Derek? Last I heard, he was facing a hefty fine and community service. I guess you could say he's got a lot of time now to reflect on the importance of native plants and garden gnomes. It was a Thursday morning that began like any other, with the grey light of dawn barely breaking through the overcast sky. I was on my bike navigating the congested streets of the city en route to the far side of town for work. Cycling had always been my preferred mode of transportation, offering both freedom and the occasional adrenaline rush that comes from dodging traffic. However, nothing could have prepared me for the encounter that awaited me at the railroad crossing. The incident started without warning. As I approached the crossing, I noticed a line of cars beginning to form, waiting for the impending train. Among them was a luxury SUV, its shiny interior reflecting a sense of entitlement. The driver, whom I'll refer to as Karen, seemed in a rush, her impatience palpable even more inside her vehicle. In an attempt to get ahead, she cut me off so closely that I could feel a rush of air as her car passed by, nearly causing me to lose control of my bike. Instinctively, I shouted and gestured, hoping to make her aware of the danger she put me in. This, however, only seemed to ignite her anger. Lowering her window, Karen unleashed a barrage of insults, her words laced with venom. She questioned my intelligence, my right to be on a road, and made it abundantly clear she considered herself superior. Trying to maintain my composure, I turned away, focusing instead on the crossing gates that were now descending. The train's approach meant a forced pause in our journey, a brief moment of calm, or so I thought. But calm was far from what followed. Karen, driven by an unfathomable rage, exited her vehicle and stormed towards me. Her stride was purposeful. Her eyes fixed on me with an intensity that was unsettling. She was a storm personified, and I was directly in her path. "What's your problem?" she demanded, standing so close I could feel the heat of her breath. "Can't you see important people have places to be?" I was taken aback by her audacity. "We all have to wait for the train." I tried to reason with her. There is no need for this hostility, but my words were lost on her. In a moment of sheer madness, Karen attempted to shove me toward the tracks. The train, a massive metal monster, thundered by, indifferent to the life and death struggle happening beside it. Adrenaline kicked in, sharpening my senses and fueling my reflexes. I resisted, pushing back with all my strength I could muster, desperately trying to avoid a deadly fall onto the tracks. The struggle was intense, a test of wills where failure meant potential death. In a moment of desperation, I used the only weapon I had, my helmet. With a swift motion, I headbutted Karen, and the impact sent her reeling backward onto the ground. It was an act of self-defense, one that I wished hadn't been necessary. The scene had attracted attention, drawing a crowd of onlookers. Their phones were out, some recording, others calling for help. It wasn't long before the police arrived, their presence bringing a sense of order to this chaos. Witnesses were quick to come forward, their accounts painting a clear picture of the events. Despite Karen's attempts to twist the narrative, the evidence was overwhelming. She was arrested on the spot, her face a mix of shock and indignation as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. As for me, I was left standing there, my heart still racing, trying to process what had just happened. The encounter with Karen at the crossing had escalated from a mere road rage incident to a life-threatening confrontation in a matter of minutes. So, just for a bit of context, my mom and dad own a plant nursery. From what I was told, our annoying neighbor was a retired lawyer with too much time on his hands, and he lived just down the hill from us and owned the dam as well. So let's get into this, for it's long. So this happened back a few years ago when I was in year 11 of my high school, about mid-autumn. Keep in mind this is Australia, so it's bloody dry. We get a formal complaint from our annoying neighbor. This isn't a big shock because at this stage, we were getting formal complaints from him every 2 weeks or so. Anything from too much noise to yes, too little of noise, our dog, our hill eroding, anything this guy could think of. It came in his usual lawyer-style letters. Anyway, this guy had written us a letter claiming we had infected his water with blue-green algae. We would have to pay all the damages to his property, including vet bills for his horses. Now, my mom and dad were furious with this guy, for when we were having our dam built, this guy kept complaining about how the runoff from our pots would change the nutrient level in the water. So when Dad built this, he went all out. He had a natural filtration system with 2 smaller dams that all water would go through first, filled with natural water filter plants, reeds and other plants. Then it would go through a chlorinator, and finally, a bummed filter. Every month, Dad would backwash mains into the dam to keep the dam the right pH, and pump the water constantly to keep it aerated. So my parents replied a flat no. So our neighbor makes his biggest mistake and calls Melbourne Water to look at our dam and test the water. And guess who had to pay for the water testing fee? So Melbourne Water guy gets there and is quite pissed for his co-worker called in sick, and he's going to have to collect water samples from all water inflows and overflows and the dam itself by himself. Do salinity tests, pH tests, and send samples back to the lab for further testing. I thought it was interesting because I was doing chemistry at the time, so I went out to talk to him about it. He looked at our setup, and to say the least, was pretty impressed. He asks why it was getting reviewed. 1, due to how dry it is and how water isn't overflowing from our dam to his. And 2, why is the neighbor getting reviewed due to him being the one with blue-green algae? He soon gets explained all the nonsense our neighbor gives us and expresses his sympathy. When he's about to finish up, he suddenly asks about the fence line that goes through the annoying neighbor's dam, and I tell him about how a few years back, the neighbor had told us to reinstall our connecting fence in order to keep our dog in, and how Dad had to pay for it all. Dad was pissed and decided to review over our property border and didn't give up a centimeter of land to this guy even if it went through his dam. Now the Melbourne Water guy smiles and says, "Well, I'll have to get a sample of that as well, won't I? Since it's your water." After this, he talks to my parents about our options and says that the review will be scheduled soon about the water contamination. By the way, I was not present for the meeting. Mom and Dad relayed the whole thing to me. Anyway, going on. So about a month later, the council had us sit down for a meeting with an annoying neighbor there, and all he knew was it was about contamination of water and he was looking smug. Then it starts. Melbourne Water guy goes on to state that the contamination did not come from our dam and likely came from annoying neighbor horse poo runoff into his dam. But without further testing on annoying neighbor's property, there will be no conclusive evidence. The annoying neighbor just looks confused because why have a council meeting for this? But the Melbourne Water guy isn't done yet. He then goes on to state that there has been in fact contamination to our water from his, as we have a cubic meter of water coming across from his dam. I heard he just went bail as he realized what this meant for him. He would have to pay us for damage. He quickly got composure and claimed that we do not use that cubic meter of water and therefore do not have damage. It was my mom's turn now. She got up and told the council she wanted to use this water for a water exhibit for our plants range for when customers came over to look at our plants, but could not do so with the water contaminated. The council had already seen the plans and agreed. So the annoying neighbor was then forced to pay for Melbourne water to come out and determine where the contamination was, and then set up a filtration system similar to ours, which cost Dad about 20k, to decontaminate the water so we could do our water garden. P.S. If the Melbourne water guy is reading this, I know we already thanked you, but you were great. Thanks for helping us get back at the annoying neighbor. As for the annoying neighbor, he didn't send us a complaint letter for a few months after this, but they did eventually come back. This happened a few years ago. A bit of backstory. I am Dutch, and at the time I was 29, I live with special care and I get paid disability by a government agency, which is 80% of minimum wage for someone my age. The job I had at a place we will call job director, it's not really a job, more like the place where I'm giving care, is paying job director to keep me entertained during the day, so I'm not stuck at home 24/7. So to sum that up, job director isn't paying me a dime. They are paid for me to be there, and any actual work I do while there also turns them a profit. It's fair to say that they make double the money on me being there. Just keep that in mind as I start the story. Working at job director, I was a personal assistant to the electrician they had on staff. Let's call him Gus. Gus was an old hand in a trade, and he was nearing his retirement. He worked only 2 mornings in a week. I worked 4 mornings in a week, so I was a perfect fit to be his assistant. And we did everything, not just electrical, but also plumbing and putting up storage racks. And I did most of the menial things, like the toolbox around, hand him tools, or the ladder he was standing on, you name it. I did often get the crabby side of the jobs, but that's how you learned a trade in the old days before formal job training. Do the sucky jobs and stick around and you'll learn a thing or two. Well, that is what happened. I learned how to do most of the things Gus was doing regularly. It got to the point where he would send me out to do jobs alone, jobs that did not require him to inspect my work for safety reasons. Management of job director caught wind of this and having believed that people in my situation couldn't really be taught anything, they suddenly saw an untapped potential. So for the other 2 days where Gus didn't need me, job director tried to send me to another project they had going for those days. The project in question was a supervision of people's bicycles at the local train station. They had already opened a kiosk and restaurant there and wanted to add supervision to the bicycle there. Side note to you, non-Dutch out there, you'll be surprised how many bicycles are used and how many are stolen daily in my country, particularly at train stations. I had to report to a small meeting with the guy supervising the train station, let's call him Jim, so he could instruct me on the job. Basically, it was a show presence to scare off thieves type of deal. Bright orange jacket riddled with reflector strips saying bicycle security on the back. Just walking around is a job I could easily do. But being more forward-thinking than my disability would suggest, I of course have questions, and the conversation went like this. Okay, so what about if I catch someone in the act of trying to steal a bike, and he attacks me? Am I covered for defending myself or the potential trauma the thief inflicts on me? That was my first question. With a somewhat surprised look, Jim would answer, "Oh, don't worry about it. That's never to happen." Guess he didn't expect that kind of question from me. I've seen stranger things happen, so I don't buy Jim's answer. But I press on. Okay, so what about any incidents that happen? When an incident happens, just stay there and call me. Okay, so you'll provide me with a job phone then. At this point, Jim starts looking a bit annoyed at me. What for? You have a cell phone, don't you? Just use that. I found that to be a weird answer. And while I do look up the occasional schematic for Gus and myself, that's always over the company Wi-Fi we installed. But actually using my cell phone bill for work? Nah. Okay, can I put in for the amount of my cell phone bill I use up for work? I ask. What the hell for? Jim says, starting to get angry. It's just a single less than a minute phone call to call me over. Now, some people might agree with Jim at this point, but let me point out that everyone that is actually on job director's staff payroll has a work phone assigned to them by the company. They want me, the lowest of the low, unpaid worker, to use my private phone? No, I draw the line there. But I didn't have to say anything else anymore as Jim goes. You know what? Never mind. go back to your original spot because you're being too difficult. He tells me that. Well, at the time I filed the whole thing away as something weird and dismissed it as I went on my way, not really having caught on to a changing trend at the company. Fast forward a month or two and I've learned more about electronics, including the NEN 3140 certification. Let me go off topic for a minute here. This certification is a Dutch certification for electric appliances inside of a business. I don't know most of the terminology in English, but it has to do with job safety. Any appliance that is movable by hand needs to be certified. This includes, but is not limited to, computers, corded power tools, chargers for battery-powered tools, fridges, freezers, and washing machines. If it has a plug on it for a standard electrical outlet, it needs to be certified. If, for instance, Timmy uses an angle grinder and it malfunctions, causing Timmy to get electrocuted, just making up an extreme example here, and the angle grinder wasn't NEN 3140 compliant, well, a company will be looking at a hefty fine from a government agency dealing with job safety. And on top of that, health insurance won't pay out to cover whatever compensation Timmy needs or is entitled to, meaning the company itself will need to cough that up too. Now back to the story. So Gus and I do this NEN 3140 certification for every location job director has. Gus is a certified NEN 3140 inspector and has a specialized testing device. I can do the job for him under his supervision. I actually do most of the computerized paperwork for him because Gus is a single-finger hunt and pick kind of user of the keyboard, while I myself 10-finger blind type. Shaves literally a few months from the work for Gus. Total count of devices tested at just the company itself, 756. Keep that number in mind, folks, as it's important. During one of our drives back to our morning start site, just before our shift ends, Gus, being an older helpful guy that sometimes worries about people's futures, and knowing how I can easily do the NEN 3140 on my own, starts to talk about maybe a potential future for me to be an NEN 3140 certifier. In that conversation I learned the following. Getting the diploma is about 50 euros for a 2-hour seminar, which you have to do yearly to keep your NEN 3140 certifier status. The testing device costs about 1,000 euros to buy and will cost around 500 euros to calibrate it to specification every year. If you are a certifier and you have your own equipment, you can go to a company and ask a minimum of 20 euros per power plug. Note, I said power plug, not passed or rejected appliances. Just having the plug plugged into the tester is money for me. Remember that number of total devices? 756? Well, 756 by 20 euros, it equals 15,120 euros. That's already way more than I make a year from the disability pay, for just 2.5 months of work at my current work hours. The only logical thing I could respond with after having calculated that for the first time was, "Thanks, Gus, you've given me some food for thought." About a week after this conversation, Gus tells me that they have a small-time business requiring NEN 3140 certification, but that he's too busy with another job. So if I could do it instead, I go and I test all the devices they have, 35 plugs in total. I generate the paperwork and ensure that there is a printed copy of the manual for all said devices that were certified and place 35 signatures on the paperwork in Gus' name. Total time taken for all that was about 2 weeks total. Client is happy, I'm happy, Gus is happy, and the company is happy. 2 weeks after having completed that, another one comes up. So again, I do it. This time under Gus' supervision. 514 plugs, 2 months of work, and my wrist was in agony after sitting 514 signatures. Remember, I am the lowest of the lower unpaid workers there, so I already decided that I wasn't going to be doing that for long. At this point, Gus is almost a single year away from his retirement. And in our daily conversations in his car, he had already pointedly told me that when my retirement hits, I'll be leaving my tools at home and never touching them again unless they pay me. He's a can't sit still at home type, so he was going to be sticking at the company as a volunteer together With his wife, he was working also there, not doing electronics work anymore. And the upper management of job director saw an untapped gold mine, me doing NEN 3140 certifications. So I was called into a small meeting. Gus was there, some HR-like person, and one of the underbosses. They started buttering me up about helping me get a certifier license at a great deal of half off. The testing device they had already bought and paid for, on the one hand possible career choice, on the other hand, no way am I going for 80% of minimum wage considering what kind of money they would be making off of me, let alone the position of responsibility I'll be lifting. As rankings in the company go, I am literally the lowest of the low. I have no say. Gus, when he found an appliance while doing the NEN 3140, will put a cable snipper onto the power cord and cut it as close to the appliance as possible. I don't have that kind of authority. And you'll just know that the company will continue using an appliance even if I reject it. Now, who do you think is going to take the fall for that if someone gets unscheduled electroshock therapy? Covering the financial situation first, I asked him what I will get in return. The response left me lukewarm and I quote, "Payment? This is a bit of responsibility, which is a good thing for you." Yeah, just because I live with special care and get a disability, they think that I have no responsibility at all. And I wasn't out to milk them dry or anything. If they did pay me above a certain amount, it wouldn't be a benefit to me, but determined as a disability I get would be leaving me even worse off. But some compensation would have been nice, right? More relaxed hours, different job title that would actually allow me to throw out the appliances that didn't make it. A company cell phone maybe. Nope, they wouldn't budge. So I told them where they could stick their bit of responsibility. Well, I'll tell you something though. Because of my disability, I didn't get scolded. Not in any official capacity anyways. But Gus was not happy. In a later conversation I had in his car, he said that I was being stupid and that I won't make it anywhere in life if I don't try anything new. This is of course coming from the guy who's been raving for 2 years now how he'll never pick up his tools again after he's retired. I pointed out his hypocrisy and that if he doesn't want to do the work, if he is not getting paid, then why should I? He has no answer of course and stays quiet. A week passed, and I was notified that Gus no longer wanted to work with me because he disapproved of my work ethics. Well, that suited me just fine. As much as I respect his age and experience, I was getting tired of him harping on about my disability and his disapproval of how I choose to spend my free time like the dude is my dad or something. And an hour later I heard that the company was making deals with other companies for NEN 3140 certifications. I had already smelled something fishy a week before Gus no longer wanted to work with me and had taken prudence to look for another company that would be happy to have my presence and the payment they would get for having me over 4 mornings of the week. The following morning I was called over and they started to tell me about the job at a major company in the area, upwards of 1,500 plus appliances. My boss was very enthusiastic about it. I mean, who wouldn't be for 30k euros? And that I needed to do that job under Gus' supervision, meaning Gus would drive me out there to then leave me there to do his own workload, then pick me up again at quitting time. I told the boss that I was happy for him landing such a big job and I enthusiastically told him that I just got hired somewhere else. And because I am unpaid, I had no obligation to give prior notice. The boss went white as a sheet, trying to tell me that I couldn't just do that, and that I had to have a 3-month exit period. I knew it wasn't true, so I just laughed all the way out the door to my new job that certainly appreciated me more than this company.